Community College is one of the largest of Virginia's community colleges. This fall we have about 8,000 students, and we consider ourselves the centerpiece jewel in the crown of the Virginia Community College system, particularly committed to today's topic of economic development. We're well known in the area for working with business and industry and leading the way in developing a high-performance, high-technology workforce. The college is named after the Virginia patriot, Thomas Nelson, and a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And I have found that it's very wise in times of confronting difficult problems for me to go to Yorktown and to visit the home of Thomas Nelson and to read his papers to see if there is something I can glean from his day that would help us solve the problems of today. And as you may know, Thomas Nelson was elected governor of Virginia in 1781, and I found by reading his papers that he indeed has a solution to our current problem. In 1781, he met with the Virginia General Assembly in the midst of one of Virginia's most difficult periods during war with the British. And our economy was devastated. And his solution was that the General Assembly authorized him to print more money. And 35 million pounds of currency were printed to help Virginia through that economic period. And I'm not sure that you want to recommend that to the General Assembly as a result of your tours, but nonetheless, from history we find that it takes creative solutions to difficult problems. We're very pleased that you could join us and meet today with Lieutenant Governor Donald S. Byer, who I will now introduce. He is holding his first elected office as Lieutenant Governor. He is best known and has made a career in business in Northern Virginia with the Byers Volvo Company. He has had a special interest in economic development and thus one of the primary reasons for chairing the Commission on Economic Recovery. He is married to Megan Byer. Those of you that are in the news field will know her as an anchor on a TV station in Northern Virginia in the Washington area. So without any further ado, let me introduce Lieutenant Governor Donald S. Byer, Jr.
Thank you and good morning. H.L. Mencken said that there are some problems that will be with us 1,000 years unless we spend 5 minutes thinking about them. And what we want to do this morning is spend at least an hour or two thinking and talking, and most importantly for me, listening to some solutions on, I think, the great challenge that faces us in the latter part of the 20th century. Well, let me just speak for a minute and set the stage for what I hope will follow. Virginia is in the greatest time of economic crisis in most of the lifetimes of those people here in this room. All through the decade of the 1980s, we were 6th in the country and 1st in the South in the growth of per capita income. Last year in 1990, we fell from 6th to 46th. All through the decade of the 1980s, we were 1st in the country in federal defense spending per person and 2nd or 3rd overall in federal spending. I guess it's difficult to live on the peninsula or anywhere in Hampton Roads or Northern Virginia and not realize that that federal spending per person in Virginia is likely to be very different in the next 10 years to come. And I remember going to the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors meeting in December of '89, right after the election. And all these leaders of industry stood up there and said, our economy is really going to slow down. It's only going to grow 9%. And a few months later, they said it's only going to be 6% and then 3%. Well, the numbers are in. The Virginia economy grew 0.3% in 1990. It's the smallest growth since the Great Depression in 1931. In the New York Times this past Sunday, there was an even more telling analysis that this is the first recession in anyone's memory when typically dollars are measured in constant dollars. You deduct for inflation. And when you measure it, you find that in constant dollars the economy has shrunk, but that overall dollars have gone up. This is the first recession in memory where the overall dollars have gone down. And it's had a big impact on businesses and on credit and on banks and other financial institutions. I could keep going for about another 45 minutes on how bad things are in Virginia, but that's not our purpose at all, because there's great hope too. Anytime there's crisis, there's also opportunity. And we now have a remarkable opportunity to turn the Virginia business climate around. Back in February, Delegate Lou Parker of Mecklenburg created this Economic Recovery Commission. And we held our first meeting in July. In the first 5 minutes, the Commission agreed on a very simple one-sentence mission statement, which was to position Virginia as the best state in the country in which to do business. We have been going all over the state trying to gather your ideas to make that happen. We're very fortunate because Virginia has a number of important strategic advantages. Probably the first and most importantly is that we are Virginians. We can come to a place like Thomas Nelson Community College where we have a signer of the Declaration of Independence. We have Patrick Henry and William and Mary and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Hunter Andrews and all the people that have made America great for hundreds of years with us. And it is our manifest destiny as Virginians to lead. Virginians also have an economic size to make a difference. We're small enough to make things happen in the General Assembly. I was very glad, that was sort of a half-hearted introduction, but I am very glad to have a majority leader of the Virginia Senate, a man that I greatly respect and look up to. It's probably going too far to say he's my mentor because I haven't ever asked him for permission to say that, but Hunter Andrews is with us here today, and I'm very glad that he's here. Thank you, Senator. But with people like Senator Andrews' leadership, we make things happen in Richmond, things that often do not happen in Washington, D.C. So we're small enough to make things happen, but we're also large enough, with 6.2 million people and across the river from Washington, D.C., to be noticed and to have a big impact on the national scene. A third important advantage we have is that Virginia already has a great reputation for economic dynamism. We have a AAA bond rating. We're the only state out of the 37 or 38 facing major fiscal crises that managed to balance the budget without raising taxes. And while that has had its cost in our investment in education and infrastructure and the like, it nevertheless maintained our positioning as a good business state. This Economic Recovery Commission has had 3 tracks. There is a full commission of 13 members, 7 from the General Assembly and 5 appointments from the governor. They will meet again in Hampton Roads in 2 or 3 weeks. This is the full commission that will present its report to the General Assembly. There's a second track that's critically important, and that's 8 different work groups. One on technology, another on infrastructure, another on work group skills that a number of people in this room serve on. And those different work groups are the experts who are pulled together, who are meeting virtually every day somewhere in the Commonwealth, putting together specific ideas and suggestions to make things happen. But the third track is why we're here today. And that's our realization that we need to come to where the rubber meets the road, to the real communities, and talk to the mayor of Newport News and the economic development director of the peninsula and the head of the community college, the folks who really understand what's happening in your communities. I only ask one thing today is, when we hear from you, I've already given you my 3-sentence description of what's wrong. We don't need to know endlessly what's wrong. All of us have a really good sense of that. Instead, what we need are your ideas and your solutions, your imaginative and creative efforts on how to move us forward. One of the things we promised is that this won't be paralysis of analysis. Someone said recently that there have been 42 thick economic development reports done in the last 6 years throughout America. And they're all on somebody's library shelf or some economic development director's desk somewhere. We don't need a 43rd thick report that never is action taken upon. Instead, we want a slim but powerful, clear agenda by November 1st that we can give the governor, give the General Assembly of Virginia, and stand here with confidence and say, if you do these few things in January and February of 1992 through executive and legislative action, we will in fact reposition Virginia so that it's the best state in the country in which to do business. I'll sit down and be quiet because I want to hear desperately what you all have to say. We will take all of your suggestions back to the different work groups, to the full commission. We get a report on November 1st, which is soon. That's only 7 or 8 weeks away. Because the great danger here is that if we don't act, there will be a recovery eventually anyway. President Bush and Alan Greenspan and the like, sometime it will come back. And when that does come back, Virginia may be in the middle of the pack or worse, unless we take decisive action. But when we do come back, however slowly, we have taken away the initiative and that dire need that allows us to make substantive and constructive change now. So that's all I ask for, your strongest possible ideas, and we will listen attentively and act as decisively as we can on what you have to offer. Thank you all very much. I look forward to what you have to say.
I will try to lead off the session here this morning and set the format. Our hope is that each presenter will present somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. We've been asked to prepare your remarks in writing, if at all possible, and to leave a copy at the press table, which I will do now. And also, if you have a copy for the Lieutenant Governor, to provide that. And as I understand it, upon conclusion of your remarks, if you'll remain here just briefly in case there are any questions from the Lieutenant Governor. So with that, and with your instructions in mind, Lieutenant Governor, I would like to address the coming workforce crisis as a part of the economic recovery plan that Virginia needs. And as you've indicated, we all know many of the problems that are confronting the Commonwealth now. But I'm going to briefly touch on some of those that build the case for why I think our workforce is in very serious condition long term. Between now and the end of the century, or the beginning of the new century, our workforce is anticipated to grow by 25%. We know that many of those jobs are going to require advanced training in the scientific and technical fields. And yet when we look at student achievement in our schools, we find out that our students rank at the bottom of international tests of measures of math and science. We find that of every 9th grade class in Virginia, 1 out of 4 of those 9th graders never completes high school. We know that by the year 2000, the average new job will require more than a high school diploma, but less than a baccalaureate. Yet, we also know that more than half of Virginia's high school graduates today are neither prepared to continue their education, nor are they prepared to enter the workforce. It's difficult to imagine that Virginia's future workforce will be competitive in a global marketplace when achievement lags far behind the rest of the world. And yet add to these figures the fact that 90% of Virginia's workforce in the year 2000 is already employed. And they came to the workplace at a time when the skill requirement and knowledge requirement was much lower than it will be for the 21st century. Their productivity increases over the past 15 years have been steady, but have been declining relative to the rest of the world. Their productivity increases have fallen far short of those increases in Europe and Asia, our new global competitors. And they are not receiving the education and the training that they will need to be more productive in the years ahead. By any measure, Virginia's workforce, now and in the future, is losing its competitive edge when benchmarked against world-class standards. This is indeed a crisis in the making and will require bold, imaginative, and immediate attention. Now, for the answers. In 1988, Thomas Nelson Community College and 7 of our high technology employers, including Cannon, Virginia, the Continuous Electron Beam Accelerator Facility, NASA Langley Research Center, the Newport News Industrial Corporation, Newport News Shipbuilding, Philip Morris, and several other companies, including Siemens Automotive, formed together into a task force, and we looked at what the problem on the Virginia Peninsula was. And these are what we saw. By the mid-1990s, we are going to face a significant shortfall of skilled workers in the marketplace on the Virginia Peninsula, particularly in technical and scientific fields. We forecast that there will be a shortage of over 2,500 technicians for job openings that are expected on the peninsula. But the shortage will be there because we do not have the talent in our schools today that are preparing for those jobs, nor is the existing workforce being retrained for the jobs that will be available. There's a growing mismatch between the workplace requirements and the knowledge and skill that are possessed by the existing workforce. In 1989, we issued a report called The Workforce and Technical Education for the 1990s. And we outlined 2 basic strategies to correct this situation. The first was for business, industry, colleges, and universities to join in partnerships for excellence to strengthen our schools, to see that youngsters in school today are achieving, all students achieving to world-class standards, not benchmarked against Atlanta or Missouri or California, but benchmarked against the highest in the world. And the second idea that we had was that we've got to commit ourselves to the retraining of a frontline workforce where the greatest productivity gains are going to be made, not by investing continually in increased management development, which has been so typical of the past. As a result, we've set in motion a series of partnerships that have joined the schools and business and industry together with the community college and the Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and we've brought together virtually all of our students, all of our schools, and hundreds of businesses, and we've started programs that I'll mention just very briefly. One is to interest youngsters who are in middle school about the exciting careers that will be available in math and science in Newport News and Hampton and Williamsburg, James City County, York County, and Poquoson, for those who are prepared. For those who haven't considered math and science careers as an option for them, we literally have companies go in and work with every middle school child in the 18 middle schools that we have. Cannon, Virginia is one of those companies that allows its employees to take hands-on demonstration projects to illustrate the importance of understanding math and science in the world of work. Not by some abstract application, but literally taking apart a Canon copier and why it's important to understand quality and statistical process control in manufacturing. Second, we've started a summer program for underachieving 8th graders that are going to the 9th grade who aren't going to take higher level math and science unless someone does something. We have a summer program designed for 4 weeks for underachieving or high ability, lowly motivated students to study in math and science through experiential field trips and visits to our research facilities. And this project is sponsored by the college, CBAF, and NASA. To give you an example, the program's been going for 2 years now. 96% of the students that were in the program have completed it. And these are students that have trouble staying in school 2 days in a row sometimes. And of that group, more than 85% have taken algebra and lab science rather than general science and a less rigorous science course. The third area of partnership is one that's beginning in earnest this year with Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. We call it ATTACK 2000, where businesses come together with schools and we form internships and mentorships for youngsters who, from their background, may not be able to relate to how the highly changing scientific and technical fields, career opportunities that are available to them by one-on-one developing a relationship with a business person and answering fundamental questions like why stay in school? Why study hard? Why do I want to do a good job in school? Well, these are just 3 of the projects that are going on in the Virginia Peninsula with the schools. The other one that I wanted to mention to you as an answer is a partnership between Thomas Nelson Community College and Siemens Automotive. It's the idea that companies, in order to be competitive in the 21st century, are going to have to make their organizations learning organizations where the frontline workforce is increasingly learners in the new technologies to be more productive. We've teamed up with Siemens Automotive and have created a program that's called Pay for Knowledge, a training and education program for all of Siemens frontline employees where they receive additional compensation as they demonstrate that they've mastered new knowledge and skill levels associated with increasing Siemens organizational flexibility, product and productivity, and product quality. Employees retain their home job classification, but they receive premium pay increases for gaining new knowledge and skill associated with other jobs within the corporation. It allows workers to become increasingly flexible as product lines change. 2 components of the programs help employees gain the knowledge and mastery of skills needed. One's an educational component, one's an on-the-job skills training program. Both are taught on-site at Siemens Automotive. This past year, more than 300 employees at Siemens Automotive were involved. And this year we're expecting 200 more, bringing the company employee training up to about 500 employees. Siemens will have a globally competitive frontline workforce with the goal of producing highest productivity, highest quality fuel injectors and automotive parts before the turn of the century. This is the kind of company that Virginia has to have because it will gain its increasing profitability through enhanced productivity and higher quality of products. The important challenges that I see that remain that we need to face are 4. One, our schools desperately need to be financially supported and encouraged to restructure their curriculum and how they're organized so that all students are achieving world-class standards, not just those going on to college. Second, business partnerships with education need to be encouraged and financed. The partnerships that we have with the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce are good partnerships, but we woefully lack the financing for them to do a good job. Third, the Commonwealth of Virginia needs to provide tax incentives to existing industry to invest in their workforce. It is not only the business that will be more profitable, but the Commonwealth will result in higher paying jobs, resulting in a higher standard of living for all of us. And finally, Virginia's community colleges should receive the funding to meet the demands for workforce education and training, including non-credit activities. Currently, Thomas Nelson Community College receives only 85% of the funding for the students it receives, and we cannot continue to respond to the current demands of the workforce as requested by individuals and industry. Last fall, we had to turn away approximately 500 students. Those are workers that we turned away because we don't have the resources to train them. And this year, we're at full capacity, and another 500 to 1,000 students will not be able to attend Thomas Nelson Community College. Virginia needs to make its investment in education and learning of its students and its frontline workforce if it plans to lead the nation and the world in top global competition.
Thank you, Bob, very much. 500 students turned away. Are these non-credit students that would be kept if the non-credit job-related retraining courses were funded by the state?
These are students that attempted to come out and register for credit courses as college students. Most of them are employees of the companies on the peninsula who are part-time, but who are unable to have their needs met because the classes are filled.
So they have the money, the tuition money. It's just
they have the tuition money. It's simply that the classes are not available to them. That's right.
Are you suggesting that there be state support of the business education partnerships?
I think that there needs to be a matching partnership between Virginia Business and the Commonwealth of Virginia to provide funding for workforce training. Workforce training now currently exists at two ends of the continuum: management development and workplace literacy. Those are the two extremes. Yet, increasingly we're learning that the frontline workforce, the average worker, is the one that's going to make the biggest difference in enhanced productivity, which is the key to a higher standard of living for all Virginians. It's therefore in the interest of the Commonwealth of Virginia not to wait until it's too late for Virginia employers, but to provide the incentive for employers to make the investment in their human capital.
Richard Nixon called it the silent majority. In Siemens, is paying their employees to learn other employees' jobs while retaining their existing job classification. How do they justify that financially?
Well, Siemens is an internationally competitive firm, and it knows that it has to be competitive internationally. It knows also that America's workforce is significantly behind its European workforce, and they know they must make the investment in that workforce if they're to bring them up to the quality to be competitive. So for them, it's not a new corporate strategy. In America, it is a new corporate strategy. In Germany, it's not unusual for companies to invest between 4 and 6% of their payroll in company training. In the United States, you'll have to look hard to find a company investing more than 1% of payroll in its employees.
Let me restate the question too, though. From your description, it sounded like Siemens was doing a pay for knowledge, so that someone in this job classification, if I'm teaching history here and I learn how to be the president of Thomas Nelson Community College, I'm going to make more money.
That's correct.
And vice versa.
That's because that enables the company to develop a potentiality in a market that is characterized by increasingly products changing instantaneously. It allows the company to use that human resource flexibly to respond to market-driven demands. Right now, if you're a specialist, you can do only one thing. When that product is no longer needed, you're a liability to the company. They need that human flexibility to stay competitive.
Any final ideas on how we can financially reward public school systems in order to restructure their curriculum to meet world-class standards?
Yes, I do. I think that instead of concentrating on merit pay for teachers and holding individuals accountable, let's learn from the leading businesses which create teams and hold schools accountable for improving results continuously, not benchmarked against one another, but against their last year's performance. Set standards and hold the school accountable and award resource increases on the basis of that progress. So the standard for Southwest Virginia and Northern Virginia would be different, but they would be expected to make school-based improvements year after year after year in order to receive additional funding for salaries and resource enhancements.
Which also means site-based management.
Yes, it does.
Thank you very much.
I would now, I know that several of our speakers have requested, because of their schedules, that we call upon them early, and I'd like to start with Mr. Barry Duval, Mayor of Newport News. Barry.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, welcome to the Virginia Peninsula. We're pleased to have you here today, and pleased to have the majority leader here today, and also want to echo the appreciation to Bob Templin for hosting us, as well as his leadership on the Virginia Peninsula. We're very pleased to have you demonstrating the leadership that you're demonstrating on the Virginia Peninsula, Bob, and thank you for hosting this event today. I want to briefly review some remarks for the audience, as well as point out perhaps 5 specific suggestions that might help the citizens of Newport News with our economic development. As you know, the city of Newport News is host to major industries, the largest in the Commonwealth of Virginia being Newport News Shipbuilding, and as well as other important industries, many of whom are represented here today. We, like other municipalities, found ourselves experiencing budget shortfalls as well as budget challenges. Last year we had to remove $10 million from our budget in order to maintain the financial integrity of our city. We were able to do that, and the financial integrity of our city remains in place. And we credit good city management and willing employees and staff for their ability to work with us in meeting the challenges of local government. But like all other Tidewater cities, Newport News is experiencing many challenges, some of which are imposed upon us by the state, others of which are imposed upon us by the economy. One, which is one of the 5 specific suggestions that I wanted to make today that the Commonwealth could assist us with, is in the area of the Chesapeake Bay Protection Act. We want to be a partner in the protection of the Chesapeake Bay, but we would like to see a balanced and economically productive way in protecting the Chesapeake Bay. The specific area I want to draw your attention to is the downtown area of Newport News. The city has over 50 miles of tidal shoreland on the James River and Hampton Roads, including many of our creeks and streams. The downtown area of Newport News is extremely intensively developed with industrial waterfront stretching over 5 miles of our city. This area includes the shipyard, includes Newport News Marine Terminal, also includes the 2 international coal transmission facilities which are represented here today, as well as the Seafood Industrial Park. It creates over 30,000 jobs and millions of dollars in tax base for the city as well as the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's an intensely developed waterfront area and has long lost any intrinsic value in terms of the water quality. Most of, in fact all of the area is already regulated by many agencies and many standards which are far above the Chesapeake Bay. The organization to now set forth standards which have been imposed upon us by the Chesapeake Bay Act are significantly counterproductive to economic development in the city of Newport News. I would suggest that the Commission work to limit the ability of the local assistance department to demand more of a local government than is required by law, and that the department be instructed to consider the economic impact of its Chesapeake Bay provisions. So I specifically mean it's impossible to restore the Newport News shipbuilding back to a vegetation state if anything were to happen to it, and some practical considerations be given in reviewing the Chesapeake Bay plan. We would appreciate your help in this area. While Newport News continues to remain strong, it is every indication that the world is changing and that we are going to be looking at smaller and smaller budgets for national defense. And we are considering that this will likely lead to a reduction in workforce and personnel in the coming years in Newport News shipbuilding. We don't have any firm numbers to be quoting today, but we do know that we are taking steps on the Virginia Peninsula to be prepared for this. One of the areas that the state could help us assist in, and it's been mentioned here today, is the training of employees and perhaps even the retraining of employees that might find themselves unemployed in the future and need to have the opportunity with new skill levels, and a partnership be developed in retraining of employees that may be in a position where they find themselves unemployed in the future as a result of downsizing of our defense budget. Another area of focus for the Commonwealth provides funding for economic development and local support. Specifically, a project that has been successful for Newport News is the Shell Building Program. It's been tremendously successful in attracting new businesses and industry. In fact, in Newport News, we have an area called Oakland Plantation Industrial Park, and Oakland Plantation has 2 Shell buildings built with local money, and both of these facilities now house productive manufacturing businesses. Additionally, these buildings attract the attention of other manufacturing firms and entice them to visit the Virginia Peninsula. Several of these firms subsequently bought land from the city and built their own facilities. Many of these firms would have never seen the park if it had not been for the draw of these Shell buildings. The city is now in the process of designing our third one in Oakland, and we'll be beginning construction of that in the near future. The Commonwealth could assist local governments by fully funding its Shell Building Program, whereby localities may receive the design and construction money, which then could be paid back to the Commonwealth upon the sale of the Shell building. I'm speaking specifically for local governments throughout Virginia. This particular loan kind of program could be helpful for them throughout Virginia. Newport News has been fortunate to have the funds in our Economic Development Department to do that in advance. But certainly it would help most localities throughout the Virginia Peninsula to have this kind of economic fund available for construction. For several years now, the city has worked with the Virginia Port Authority to stimulate activity and expand opportunities at the Newport News Marine Terminal. This is another area which we would like to draw your attention to. Much has been accomplished at the terminal in recent years, but we believe that much remains to be done in this area of significant potential for the Virginia Peninsula. One project which I'd like to bring to your attention is that recently the city and VPA jointly funded an $80,000 feasibility study which indicated that a modern cruise terminal, cruise ship pier, and terminal building would be successful in downtown Newport News. We jointly funded this particular feasibility study, and we believe that the potential of fully funding this effort should be given to the Virginia Port Authority at the earliest possible time for its next budget consideration. It would in turn stimulate tremendous economic activity in the downtown area of Newport News. Finally, I want to encourage a specific program, recommend the Commonwealth continue a program with its Industrial Road Access Program. This financial effort significantly benefits localities that has the need to design road construction to areas which are not easily accessible. Highways are very expensive to build. Local governments cannot always take on the burden of building and constructing these highways in order to make land available for economic development. By relying on the state, we're able to construct the infrastructure which is needed to open up developable property to business interests and expand and diversify our local tax base, which in turn helps the Commonwealth of Virginia. What I'm suggesting in the area of economic development really is just seed money, which will help the local governments in Virginia, including Newport News, grow. Lastly, I thank you for heading up this particular commission and going around the state and listening to the ideas. I guess from a local mayor's perspective, I feel like all politics is local, and listening to the people who are closest to the ones who we both represent is a very advantageous way for you to build an economic strategy for the Commonwealth of Virginia that will be a firm foundation and take us well into the next century. thank you for the leadership that you're demonstrating in that area and for your time and attention today.
Good. Thank you very much. It's a great education too, for me. I've got a couple of quick comments and questions. On the industrial access road plan, that's come up a number of places, and one of the more interesting suggestions, along with the ideas of increasing the amount of money allocated to it from its current $4 to $5 million and increasing the dollar amount per project and the like, was to move it from VDOT to the Department of Economic Development. It's sort of interesting structurally to get into a place where it is going most directly to projects that have the greatest return. Is there the demand for a passenger ship cruise here in terminal? I don't think Newport News is the typical place the Love Boat comes.
Right. What I'd like to do, if you haven't already gotten it, is provide you with a copy of the feasibility study and have your commission look at it from an economic development perspective. When you look at the results of the feasibility study, it does point to a gap somewhere along the eastern shore, eastern seaboard of the United States that would lend itself successfully to a cruise terminal. With the new I-664 being developed, going right through that area, access would be extremely convenient. In addition, there's a view that the Virginia Peninsula holds so much to offer tourism already that this particular addition would be able to be capitalized on and would be successful, especially for short trips. We were only just a few hours from international waters with our port, and so even short 1 and 2 day trips would accommodate an opportunity that other ports on the eastern shore seaboard of the United States don't necessarily have. So we'd like to send you that study, ask your committee to consider it. It'd be something we know where funds are in the state level as well as the local level, but we want to keep the idea alive.
It's an interesting idea, too. When they discontinued the funding for the shell building program, there were 3 or 5 shell buildings out there, planned but unfunded. Did Newport News or the Peninsula have any on that list?
No, we have not. We have locally funded our shell building program, but yeah, we have too much money. So.
Everything east of 95 and I qualify for short building.
Yeah. It's more of a rural program that you've had across the state. That's right.
And with a renewal and a refunding, there's an opportunity.
That's right.
In the days ahead. On the you and Bob both talked about industrial retraining and the like. One of the national ideas floating around that came out of the Ira magazine or Alan Wurtzel's commission, et cetera, was the notion of a I don't want to say tax, but almost a 1% tax on businesses for retraining, so that if a business spent 1%, as opposed to 4 or 6% in Europe, spent 1% on retraining, there was no tax. But if only spent 0.5%, the other 0.5% was taxed and went into a fund that was then spent on retraining on a state basis, on a national basis, et cetera. Do you have any sense, as a mayor and as a business person, of the efficacy of something like that?
Well, it hasn't been an idea that's been discussed here locally. I do think there's going to have to be a creative mechanism developed in order to provide the funding for many of the ideas that you're hearing, including the retraining program. We do not have an idea to put forward or to endorse that particular idea, but I think it's going to require a creative vehicle to provide the funding, and one which is going to need to have the waters tested to see if it will be successful. That may be one of them.
One last statement too. The Chesapeake Bay local assistance departments mandate to you to return to a natural state part of the Newport News waterfront. Is that not in the original legislation, federal or state? Is this something that is being
It is
developed
part of the
entirely
new
by the
Chesapeake Bay regulators that this particular area, if in fact needed to be restored, would be restored naturally. And it's been the only real point of contention that we've had getting our program through the committee. We just think it's economically impractical to have that clause in there, and we would prefer to exclude the new shipbuilding, coal piers, and other businesses in the downtown area.
But what are you saying? There's no legislative mandate that it be.
That's correct. It's a regulatory, and from a regulatory perspective, there is some leeway that they have on interpreting which areas need to be included. So anything you can do to assist us, we would appreciate.
Thank you. very
Thank
much.
you for your time.
Next, I'd like to call Mr. James L. Eason, the Mayor of the City of Hampton.
Thank you.
Morning, Governor Byron. Certainly thank you for coming to Hampton again. We well remember your stroll down Queensway, the Bay Days celebration 2 years ago, and like to think that that propelled you to your current status, and invite you to come back next week and take a victory lap as we do the Bay Days again. But we do appreciate your coming, and it's my pleasure to participate on behalf of the City of Hampton. Throughout recent administrations, the partnership between state and local governments in the pursuit of economic development for the Commonwealth of Virginia has been a high priority. Much of Virginia's progress in education, transportation, and cultural arts has been fueled by the significant increases in various sectors of the economic development spectrum. At the heart of much of this success has been the consistent and clear direction of both state and local governments operating from the same set of goals and objectives. Recent actions, or in some cases inactions at the state level, bring into question these long-standing assumptions regarding the cooperation of state and local governments in the recruitment of significant economic development opportunities to the Commonwealth. Many of Virginia's localities are struggling in the economic development arena, and while the national economy always plays a role, much of the difficulty arises from the seemingly endless impositions of regulations without regard for economic development objectives, which have for so long been mutually shared by the Commonwealth and its localities. The most prominent of these areas of conflict is that of environmental policy versus economic development. No one disputes the necessity to strike the appropriate balance between the Commonwealth's precious environment and economic development. And yet, the past 2 years have seen a seemingly unending array of uncoordinated environmental regulations which have stymied economic development initiatives in unmeasurable proportions. Amidst all of this struggle with programs such as the federal non-tidal wetlands policies, the Commonwealth has provided little or no assistance to localities in influencing the outcome of these critical policy issues. In addition, it appears that some branches of the state government appear intent on establishing additional impediments to economic development with little or no environmental benefit. Last year's attempt by the State Water Control Board to duplicate an already controversial and flawed non-tidal wetlands program through the Virginia Water Protection Permit is but one example. To be successful in the highly competitive economic development game, it is absolutely necessary for the state and local governments to share the same goals and objectives supported by consistent and mutually supportive programs and policies. While localities have struggled to influence national policies which could result in enormous adverse economic development impacts, the state government has been remarkably silent on these issues. While one branch of the state government actively recruits new business to Virginia, another proposes policies which diminish Virginia's competitive position. This course must not be allowed to continue. For the Commonwealth to prosper, especially in difficult times, a more cooperative and coordinated approach to local, state, and national policies must materialize. Virginia's localities cannot be expected to achieve their potential otherwise. My remarks today are very timely because the 4 federal agencies that regulate activities in areas called wetlands have finally proposed a new manual which would moderate the jurisdictional overreaching by these agencies that have been rampant in our area since 1989. We understand from the press that the Wilder administration intends to comment on the proposed corrections to the manual through the Department of Natural Resources. We certainly hope that these comments will support the corrections which have been proposed and also support further revisions which are necessary to avoid unnecessary and unwarranted interference with the rights and responsibilities of landowners, local governments, and the Commonwealth alike. We in Hampton have been particularly concerned by remarks which have been attributed to Ms. Elizabeth Haskell in the press. Those remarks have suggested that the proposed revisions to the manual may go too far and may result in the loss of regulatory protection in some areas that are truly valuable wetlands. This is not the case. The federal agencies have merely proposed a long overdue correction toward a more moderate, responsible means of defining wetlands, one that would require that wetlands occasionally actually be wet. In Hampton, we have analyzed the effects of the proposed revisions to the federal manual firsthand. We have found those revisions have the promise of providing some relief to property owners, municipalities, and the Commonwealth itself, as we all struggle to provide needed facilities like schools, hospitals, libraries, roads, and places of employment. At the same time, it would retain all areas that are properly regarded as wetlands, and even some that are not, within the control of federal regulators. Reports that bald cypress swamps would be vulnerable to development under the proposed manual are grossly exaggerated. To undermine the corrections that finally have been proposed by the federal regulatory agencies would at the same time undermine the economic development goals of both the Commonwealth and the City of Hampton. Adverse comment on the proposed revisions would represent bad science and bad public policy. We very much hope the Wild administration and the Secretary of Natural Resources will pay greater attention to these issues before framing its comments on the proposed federal manual. I again would like to thank you for coming. If you detected a tone of frustration in my voice this morning, you're absolutely correct. In the 14 years of public service on the school board and as mayor of this city, there have been very few, if any, issues that have bothered me as much as this one. I believe it is absolutely ridiculous for the state to spend millions of dollars in its economic development efforts and at the same time be deaf to our pleas for assistance and not lift one finger to help us. Training the workforce is a beautiful topic, but if the workforce has no place to work, we waste a lot of time today and probably dollars tomorrow. And I hope that we can energize you to assist the many localities in Virginia that must deal with this problem. And believe me, it is urgent that you do so. We'd be glad to offer assistance to you. The City of Hampton has been forced to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars regarding this matter. And in doing so, we feel that we're very informed. We would ask that you let us work with you and please to help us. Thank you.
Probably the greatest surprise for me doing these public hearings around the state has been the frequency of testimony like yours. Predictably, the single thing that folks have talked about in 20 different planning district commissions most frequently is education. And that was probably very predictable. What I never predicted was how many mayors and supervisors and business leaders and community leaders from all over have talked about the capriciousness of the regulatory environment and the uncertainty. We have a regulatory work group set up. It's hard at work. It's got a variety of interesting people on it. Chaired by Delegate Bill Axel, who chaired the Regulatory Overhaul Commission in Governor Raab's administration and chaired another Efficiency in Government Commission in Governor Bilal's administration. And they are very hard at work on exactly the challenge that you have just issued. Additionally, I know the governor has instructed Secretary Fromme and Secretary Haskell of those two agencies a couple months ago to get together and to develop a plan so that natural resources wasn't undoing what economic development was trying to do and vice versa. And I don't know what the date of that, the success or what product they expect, but I know there's much anticipation that they're going to overcome this problem that you lay out of agencies working at cross purposes.
Well, I would certainly hope that you would follow through with that. And to put this in perspective, I'm going to say a few things probably I shouldn't be saying, but I want to emphasize this.
You already have, so.
But, you know, the danger in all of this is the misperception of the people at large when we talk about environmental issues, that we're talking about developing the beaches and the swamps and the bogs and all of that. What we're talking about is developing right within a good golf shot of where you are today. the Thomas Nelson Community College is fighting this very issue, and it's my understanding, and certainly President Templin could correct me, but Thomas Nelson Community College is precluded from even pursuing expansion plans because some of the property for which the state and Thomas Nelson has claimed to is non-tidal wetlands. And we are sitting in the highest ground in the city of Hampton from a topographical standpoint, the highest elevation from sea level. Thomas Nelson cannot expand because of what is perceived to be non-tidal wetlands. Just within the last 2 days, the major road right here, Big Bethel Road, that you probably came in on as you were entering Thomas Nelson, is currently in the state. The state has started construction, or the planning for construction of this road to be a major 4-lane thoroughfare that's critical not only to this college, but in this part of the city of Hampton. The Corps of Engineers has preliminarily rejected the State Department of Transportation's plans to expand the road, and totally undoing what had been practices up until this point about road construction, which, if it goes forth, will cause the state to spend millions of dollars to, in effect, do what the Corps has said. But what is most disturbing, I think, to us is the fact that in the typical road projects, the State Department of Transportation has the responsibility of making sure the drainage of the whole entire watershed is taken care of. The Corps says no on this one because there are two major property owners that wanted to tie in to the new highway construction drainage, and the Corps has said no because allowing them to drain into this would then remove that property from wetlands. And I mean, that makes absolutely no sense. And then the third thing, within literally a quarter of a mile, or maybe right on the boundary of Thomas Nelson, the city of Hampton, through the PEDC and the State Department of Development, has been actively soliciting a major international business which tentatively has agreed to come here, that at a time when we're in desperate need for new jobs and the stimulation of the economy, will provide in the next 5 years some 1,100 to 1,200 jobs, but it's on a site that is considered to be non-tidal wetlands, and in effect it is the highest site in the city of Hampton, 15 to 18 feet, not draining into anything that's a major tributary, and unless we can get some help in clearing that in the next, really literally 30 days, but we have a very good chance, and the state of Virginia has a very good chance, of losing what would be a major international project. Now these are but three examples of properties that you can see. There are no swamps, there are no beaches, there's nothing here within sight. And yet the college is precluded from expanding, the highway department is precluded from doing a major road, and the city of Hampton and the state of Virginia is precluded from getting 1,200 new jobs for our city and the Commonwealth. It needs some action. Over the last several years, we have got nothing from the state of Virginia, and today is a plea for you, if we're serious about the whole purpose of this forum, is to assist us in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Next, I'd like to ask Mr. Jack Davis, Vice President and Editor of the Daily Press.
I have to confess, it never occurred to me to make a copy of any remarks of mine for the press. I don't know what that says. Lieutenant Governor Byer and President Templin, thanks for asking me to talk, and thanks for staging this forum. I think it'll be very valuable. We just got a news story out of it, for instance. I guess I'm sort of an unlikely participant in that the public officials are normally sated with advice from newspapers and newspaper editors, and it's rare that they ask for more. But let me just continue, take the opportunity and see how long my welcome lasts. The Daily Press has featured the economic health and the economic development of the Virginia Peninsula, and our entire area and our entire state as one of its main concerns and issues. And as a result, we've been the forum for many of the ideas that you will hear today, that you've already heard, and many of them are worth considering. Let me put forth some of the things that have passed through the paper in the form of advice that some of the people who have been speaking in the paper, either as experts or editorial writers, have said. And I just looked down my list after the first two speakers and noticed that none of these things call for a larger state budget. Number one, establish incentives at the state level for local governments to consolidate. The largest single obstacle to economic progress on the Virginia Peninsula is the small size of government units and their inability to cooperate. None of them is capable of handling economic development for itself, let alone its neighbors. These communities cannot achieve the critical mass needed to be a coherent, growing economy without combining into a unified regional government. The purpose is not to economize on garbage collection or process tax bills more efficiently. The purpose is to become a metro area big enough to drive its own future. As Edwin Joseph, one of the most ardent and articulate believers in consolidation, has put it, it is a matter of focus, focusing our energies, focusing our attention. We need to pull together to make the peninsula one aggressive entrepreneurial force. The state needs to provide some kind of economic and political incentives for local governments to combine into units with more clout. Tell them that they can't have state money for roads, for instance, until they either merge or commit to regional cooperation in road planning. This can extend to airport growth, recycling, tourism promotion, water distribution, just to name a few of the examples. I'm sure there are many creative ways that people in this room and around the state and our areas can develop this idea further. For instance, before giving Mayor Duval all the state money he just asked for those worthy projects, require Newport News to have a coordinated, merged economic development strategy with the city of Hampton, or with the city of York County, or both, County of York. Don't ease up on wetlands requirements or the good Chesapeake Bay provisions without asking Hampton and Newport News to have a consolidated, merged staff that reviews and regulates these activities, instead of having separate Chesapeake Bay entities within each government. Put them all together if we're going to consider easing up on the regulations. Number two, establish a state plan to respond to the federal defense spending cuts. The state lacks a coherent program for responding to the decline of the federal defense budget. The administration, in fact, has not displayed the same sense of urgency that Maryland and other states have shown. This is, I think, disturbing and important, since Virginia ranks at the very top of the list of states receiving Defense Department money. I don't need to develop that notion for people here. The Hampton Roads area, where as much as half of all jobs, by some estimates, are directly or indirectly dependent on military spending, has a particularly large stake. Local officials, the people in this room, and businessmen have been talking with increasing anxiety about the need for economic diversification here. And what we need, I think, is for the state to join the discussion. Other states, notably California, Washington, Ohio, have responded to the pending cuts in their very large defense budgets, or their defense industry participation, by developing programs to convert the skills of military personnel and defense contractors employees to ventures that will be in place when the Pentagon inevitably cuts back and pulls out. What is Virginia's plan to capture the skills of 12,500 Newport News shipbuilding employees who, in all likelihood, will not be building submarines in 3 years? I'm not going to mention the remaining 15,000 who are currently building aircraft carriers. I hope there's a long future for aircraft carriers, but there's no guarantee for that. Again, these are skilled people in large number. We don't need to talk so much about retraining them. They have skills. We need to talk about having industries here that can take advantage of the skills that we already have as a major asset. Number three, strengthen state protection of the environmental quality, especially in Chesapeake Bay. Local government, left to its own devices, unfortunately permits the destruction of the environment to the point of hurting existing businesses and driving away prospective new ones. A drive on Jefferson Avenue or Mercury Boulevard or Route 17 in York County provides ample evidence of that. We can't keep residents here and businesses here or attract new ones without preserving the air and water, open space and trees, oysters and crabs. The state has taken effective steps to slow the decline of the Chesapeake Bay and wetlands. I ask the state not to be scared away from weakening, from keeping the strong regulations, resist attempts to weaken the legislation and the regulations, and get tough in other areas. A couple brief other points. Number 4, the state should quit discussing an unneeded bridge across the James River between Williamsburg and Surrey and build a needed one on the York River, upriver from Gloucester Point. And the state, I hope, will not be left out in the expansion of trade with the European community and the former countries of the Iron Curtain.
Thank you,
I hope I don't have to answer any questions.
Just a couple. It's interesting the way regional consolidation is an issue everywhere in the state. And probably I've been to Roanoke a lot recently, and it's a major issue there where they just lost a referendum on it, unfortunately. But it's interesting to look at Fairfax County where I live, which is didn't come about as a result of consolidation, but is what a consolidated area would look like after it. And the session before last, the General Assembly, literally 50% of the time of the General Assembly session was simply taking up discussion of Fairfax County business. It is amazing what a guerrilla you become when you come together for whatever purpose. On establishing a state plan, hopefully this report will be a first step in some type of economic conversion plan. And one of the things we've discovered is that economic conversion is meaningful here in Hampton Roads because of the defense industry. It's very necessary in Northern Virginia because of what overall federal spending is doing. It's very necessary in the coal fields because of the new coal technologies. It's necessary in the South Side because of what's happening with tobacco and also cotton, good things and difficult things. And overall, there seems to be a strong need for thinking ahead. Michael Porter, who wrote The Competitive Advantage of Nations, is a really interesting guy. He's tossed out all of Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill's theories about comparative advantage coming from natural resources, and instead arguing that we make our advantage, and we make it through innovation, we make it through business and politics and the press coming together concretely. The whole idea of whoever writes the first memorandum wins, and that's what we've got to do there.
Well, other states have good plans, and I think that
exactly, and we need to.
This is the state that needs to get going fastest.
I think you're absolutely right, especially because of the ratios that we're talking about. The bridge that we don't need is the one over to Surrey County to replace the ferry.
Yeah, Jamestown.
And the bridge we do need is alternative 5 or something like that.
Yes. I think you need to get traffic moving across the York River. These areas that have already developed pretty dramatically and show potential to develop more in the future, rather than trying to encourage or triggering development in a place where it's not taking place at all.
Is there a solution out there to the problems of Cheatham Annex and the alternative 5 route?
I think the alternative 5 route was a problem because of money, not because of the Navy or Cheatham Annex. I think those problems are solved.
Those are what you typically hear tossed back.
Yeah.
You can't cross the nuclear weapons or whatever.
Well, I think we decided to improve the existing bridge because it was the least expensive proposal.
Great. Jack, thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to call on Mr. Nagashima from Canton, Virginia. Mr. Nagashima is the president of Canton, Virginia.
Thank you, Dr. Temple. Mayor, good morning, and good morning to the distinguished guests today. I'm not a Virginian, but fortunately, last month I had a green card, so I have some right to speak my language here. And this opinion is not the official opinion of Canon Virginia, but basically my personal opinion. I'm living here for about more than 5 years. So from my experience living here, I'll propose 2 issues today. So, to looking for the 21st century, we have to think more about the identity of this area in the 21st century. Former days, this area is very famous about defense industries, and but the 21st century, we have to change our identity of this area. Basic thinking of mine is the the Sun Node in California is very famous about computer industries, and Raleigh in North Carolina is very famous as the research triangle areas. We have some such kind of basic identity of this area. Second one is we have to keep the environment because that maintain our quality of life for the future. Third one is the new business should have a high technology atmospheres from now. The fourth is we have to more utilize our present facilities and resources. That means less investment in economically. As to the high technology in the future, I think one of the fields is the air and space industries and computer and information industries, and also biochemical industries. To be a space industry, we have need to bring the Douglas, Lockheed, and other airplane company to here to combine their technology. I think it is not so easy way. Second field is the computer and information industries. We are now trying to be here as a Canon Virginia. But in this field, as already told you, the California area is very famous about the information and computer industry. I think it is very hard work to be the famous computer area here from now. So I thought that the 21st centuries, we should be a biochemical based identity of this area. One of the proposal is this area, the identity is the marine life and marine technologies. One of that aspect is we have William Mary's Marine Center, and also the state of Virginia is famous in research in biochemistry. This area is very famous about the social craft, but unfortunately their season is so short. So, but from now we need natural, low cholesterol and low energy and high protein food. if we succeed that kind of development of a new food industry, this will be a very attractive on the worldwide. Maybe seafood modified good food we can export to Japan. And my thinking is that this area should be some mecca of biology and biochemistry. We can also enjoy the fishing, boating, and water ski, and also the beach. That's beneficial to keep the high quality of life here. And also we have cruise leisure here. Second proposal is that the tourism. As you know, in Washington, D.C. and New York area, many domestic visitors, tourists, and also the international visitors there. Why we attract those visitors to this area? We are only the 1 hour flight locations, less than 2 hours, 3 hours driving distance from Washington, D.C. We have a very historic areas such as the Colonial Williamsburg, Victory Center, Fort Monroe, and many plantations. And also we have many museums here, such as the Mariners Museum, Fine Art Museum, Virginia Living, NASA Visitor Center, maybe next year Air and Space Museum. Also in the Norfolk, Chrysler, and Douglas MacArthur Memorials, and so on. We have more than 10 museums scattered in this area. Out to the sports and leisure, we have many good golf courses around here, such as the Golden Horseshoe, Kings Mill, and Kiln Creek, and so on. And also we have a Busch Garden, War Countries, and also Virginia Beach. Others, we have Norfolk Botanical Gardens, Tea House here, and also the fine music of Virginia Symphony. And for the shopper, we have a pottery in Williamsburg. We have to utilize those already existent facilities and institutions to make a good tourism, to develop a good tourism. So, but right now, those facilities is, in my feeling, is managed by individual locally. But to attract the outside people or international people, we need more cooperative, wide district management of the tourism. To bring the foreign companies to locate here is not so easy way. But to attract international tourists to here, I think it is easy because they have no need to huge investment. So that kind of new business or expanded wide areas planning and administration will be beneficial for this area. We can make such as a sports package, and historic package, a museum package, and combine each other. And we can make the good transportation systems from the Washington or New York. That only we can utilize our own facilities. Only 5 minutes, so today I propose 2 issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nagashima, both. Just for your information,
Yes.
2 weeks ago we kicked off a Northern Virginia Technology Council in Northern Virginia. And we began there because there are 1,000 technology businesses in Northern Virginia. But the clear plan and expectation is to extend that to Hampton Roads, to the Roanoke Valley, to all of Virginia, so that within a year we have a Virginia Technology Council whose mission is simply to make this the best technology state around. We're already okay, but as you pointed out, there are states that have raced ahead of us, California, North Carolina, and the like. And yet, if we follow through on all of Bob Templin's ideas about workforce development, we need someplace for those emerging new workers to work. We need those high technology businesses, whether they're biochemical or marine or
I'm not
manufacturing.
about chemistry, but
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much for your
Yes,
support.
thank you very much.
I was looking for the chairman of our Economic Development Council. Oh, there you go. I'd like to have Mr. Joe Cantrell, chairman of the Virginia Peninsula Economic Development Council.
Thank you, Bob, and good morning to everyone. I want to thank Bob and Thomas Nelson for hosting this. Lieutenant Governor Bauer, other members of the Economic Recovery Commission, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to present comments at this public forum. I am pleased that the state is focusing attention on the Commonwealth's long-term economic health. The patient is ill. Here on the peninsula, the situation is particularly acute. We have yet to see any significant signs of recovery from the recession, as has been the case in some other parts of the state. In fact, our economy has been sliding for several years in some key areas. And even though you asked us not to comment on the current state of affairs, I do want to make some comment, Lieutenant Governor, regarding where we are, because it relates to a trend that has been occurring for the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, and just not something that's been happening because of the current recession. Auto sales are in their 5th year of decline. Home sales have dropped about 30% since 1986. Construction is very weak. Building permits, for instance, were down 18% in Newport News and Hampton in July alone. Tourism in the Williamsburg area suffered its worst July in 7 years. Retail sales are consistently faring worse than many other areas of the state. While South Hampton Road saw a 4.9% gain in retail sales in July, for example, sales in Newport News and Hampton were down by 6.5%. We are particularly concerned about our job situation. Historically, the peninsula's unemployment rates have consistently been lower than the state average. Now our unemployment lines are growing longer. In July, while the state unemployment rate was at 6%, the rates in Hampton, Newport News, and Williamsburg approached 7%. The unemployment rate for our area is up more than a percentage point from this time last year. Concerns over reductions in defense spending and the future of Newport News shipbuilding have permeated our community and paralyzed consumer activity. The possibility of large layoffs at the shipyard due to cutbacks in naval shipbuilding over the next 5 years casts threatening clouds over our economy. I hope that the state of Virginia already is having discussions with this area's largest private employer, the shipyard, to see what assistance the state can provide in helping the yard to diversify. Why spend a lot of money and energy in going out and seeking other companies throughout the United States or the world, which we need to do, when we've got the largest employer in our state that needs our help? So I would encourage tremendously that the state look at and talk to and have discussions with and see what they can do to help the shipyard. It is critical. With our heavy dependence on defense spending, our economic future will hinge upon how successful we are at diversifying our local economy. We will need all the help we can get from the state to accomplish this critical task. So I am pleased to see this commission taking the state's economic temperature in order to focus on those issues that require action if the Commonwealth is to nurture a climate for growth. I would hope the Commission's work would include an aggressive review of incentives offered for location of new businesses within the state. The struggle to attract new companies will only get tougher in the future, and I encourage the Commission to fully explore what our neighboring states and other areas in the Southeast are doing to attract new businesses so that Virginia may remain competitive. I am told by Bud Denton, the president of the Virginia Peninsula Economic Development Council, that there's literally thousands of similar organizations throughout the United States, not counting the world, that are trying to attract the same businesses that we are trying to attract. I am concerned that state funds for training have been reduced. We've already been talking about that. I'm also very concerned that advertising to attract new businesses has been abolished. How can we let people know what we've got to offer if we aren't out there in front of them telling them about our state? That's just ludicrous to me. The shell building program has been stopped, which has already been mentioned. The rail and road access funding has been eliminated. I appreciate the problems associated with state revenue shortfalls, but all of these actions have a negative impact on efforts to establish and maintain a framework that encourages economic development. Further declines in defense spending are likely to severely pressure Virginia's economy throughout this decade, and it will require aggressive efforts to expand existing businesses and attract new ones if the state is to continue to provide jobs and a high quality of life for all of its citizens. I strongly support the goals of this commission, and I thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Very well stated, and I thank you a great deal. You say we should explore the incentives for attracting new businesses. You know, one of the ways that Virginia is handcuffed is that, unlike North Carolina and West Virginia and Maryland, we cannot constitutionally use tax incentives. Do you think we should explore changing that?
You're daggone right. We are competing with other states, not only in the Southeast, but throughout the nation. And every time we have our hands tied behind our back, it is going to work against us. So if we are to accomplish our goal of being one of the best states in the nation, or the best, to attracting business to the state of Virginia, then by golly, we've got to be as competitive as the next guy. So I think there should be no sacred cows. I think the world economy is changing, retailing is changing, businesses are changing, and the state of Virginia may have to consider changing.
Thank you. There's also, I think you point to an interesting irony. One of those early high school or college economic courses about or tales of the son that comes home from Harvard MBA and tells his father a recession is about to happen, to stop advertising and to go out of business.
That's right.
And that in many ways, that's what we've done.
That's right.
And that it's interesting to look at the businesses nationally and internationally who in times of recession use that as their opportunity to build market share and to race forward. But first they have to have the courage to make those investments at the times when the investments are most difficult.
Well, that's what it takes, is somebody with guts enough to understand the importance of getting the word out and being willing to say, well, we may have to spend more money, or at least the same amount of money in one area, in order to keep our name and all of the positives that we have in front of the prospects that we want to come to Virginia. So I couldn't encourage you more to tell the state that we need to get back into marketing this state.
There's some interesting things that I don't have the exact numbers, but 2 weeks ago in Fairfax, the chair of the Fairfax Economic Development Authority, a woman named Patricia Woolsey, reported on a national survey they had just commissioned on Fairfax County's name recognition And additionally, Virginia's name recognition, which had fallen from, I'm not exactly sure of this, it had fallen from 6th to 37th in a 2-year period of time. The name recall that businesses had in other states of Virginia as a place to do business. And the agency who had done the survey directly tied that to the disappearance of Virginia's national advertising powers.
Well, I couldn't agree with that more, and unfortunately, the only national recognition that the state of Virginia has gotten lately has not been one that I think we've all been very proud of. So that's another reason that I think we need to get out there and aggressively try and market our state in a positive way that identifies the state as we all know it is, and not what the national press or other nations throughout the world are seeing Virginia right now. It's very unfortunate.
Thank you, Joe, very much. It's always legitimate to talk about flying auto sales, too.
Next, Mr. James H. Fogelty, Chairman of the NB Corporation.
Good morning. My name is James Vogley. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Indu Corporation. We design, manufacture, and market liquid crystal-based video projection displays. We're located in the Oyster Point Industrial Park in Newport News. I started Indu in the basement of my parents' home in York County 6 years ago. Since that time, the company has grown to 35 employees with projected 1991 sales of well over $15 million. Our business plan calls for growing to a minimum of $50 million in sales by 1995 with a projected employee of 150 people. In addition to providing jobs for our own staff, we subcontract for a substantial amount of manufacturing and consulting work. This year we will spend over $2 million with local businesses. First, I'd like to talk about some of the things that are working for us here in Virginia. Oyster Point Park has significantly contributed to the success of our company. The high-tech environment provided by the park helps us to attract top-grade employees, and the close proximity of related businesses makes day-to-day operations much easier. For example, our electronic printed circuit boards are loaded with parts and flow soldered by 2 companies that are located within a quarter mile of our facility. Without the park, we would have been tempted to locate our business in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. I urge continued and increased support for Oyster Point and for similar high-tech parks across the state. The deterioration in the older high-tech regions such as Boston's Route 128 and the Washington Beltway presents an opportunity for Virginia to attract new businesses. New Horizons Technical Center has provided our firm with 3 of our most valuable electronic technicians. We continue to look to New Horizons as our growth continues. All 3 of these technicians are pursuing college degrees by taking night courses at Thomas Nelson and Christopher Newport. And parenthetically, our company has a policy of paying for any employee's college courses, providing they get a B average or better. A significant number of our employees are engineers. I would like to emphasize that it is very important in attracting and retaining professionals to have continuing education readily available. I would like to see better availability of UVA, VPI, and ODU courses on a local basis through closed circuit courses and accreditation at places such as Thomas Nelson. Now I'd like to talk about some things that are not working for us in the state of Virginia. As you may know, we have been recently involved in a serious tariff issue with the International Trade Commission and the Commerce Department. The net result has been that components critical to the manufacture of our products have been essentially banned from the United States by an onerous and, we believe, unjustified 63% import tax. This has forced us to move our manufacturing of our products to Canada. Over time, this will result in reduced job opportunities in our company as well as within our subcontractors located around the state. This situation, unless reversed, may eventually result in our moving the entire company out of the country. Let me remind you that our revenue is forecast to be $50 million or more by 1995, and we have a history of achieving our goals. In fighting this tariff, we enlisted the help of Congressman Bateman and Senators Warner and Robb. For your interest, I have enclosed a copy of their letter to the International Trade Commission in support of our cause. I would like to point out that Mr. Bateman was of particular help. We also contacted the State Economic Development Board, but they made little effort to help. From the perspective of a small but growing Virginia business, it is our opinion that the Economic Development Board is interested primarily in attracting high-profile new business to Virginia and only secondarily in the development of existing Virginia businesses. It may simply be that they are unable to respond quickly to needs such as this. So in summary, I'd like to recommend 1, continued and increased support of high-tech parks. 2, continued support of technical level programs such as New Horizons. 3, expansion of programs which provide local access to the many highly regarded college level courses scattered around the state. 4, redirection of the State Economic Development Board to provide proper and timely support of existing Virginia businesses. I'd just like to add, after hearing the comments over education, that if I look at Virginia versus Research Triangle Park versus Route 128, and I look at what is offered on the Virginia Peninsula versus the other areas in terms of attracting high-tech businesses such as ours, the biggest gap in my mind in the portfolio is the easy access to higher education. And if I look at Virginia's list of known schools, we have a very impressive educational systems, as I say, scattered throughout the state that many tax dollars have gone into a building. And I think it would only take a minor investment of additional dollars to propagate that educational system throughout the state by providing more ready access at places such as Thomas Nelson. And it would seem to make leveraged use of an existing resource if we were able to better access those schools. It's very, very important when you set up an engineering organization, which NVU is, that in attracting engineers and in selecting a site that you be able to show these people how they can continue their education, get master's degrees, get business